Okay, let's spend just a few minutes talking about linear functions and nonlinear functions. And the key question here is, how can you tell if a function is linear? Well, one way you can tell is if its graph is a straight line. The word linear has line in it, and that's what it means. It means that the graph is a straight line. And another way you can tell is if the equation can be written in the slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b. So let's look at four functions here and talk about each one of them. So the first function here, 3x plus y equals 7. So we don't know if that can be written in the form y equals mx plus b until we rearrange it. So what we can do is we can get y by itself by subtracting 3x from both sides, and we can get y equals negative 3x plus 7. And that is in the y equals mx plus b form, so we know that this is a linear function. Let's go ahead and graph it to see what it looks like. So the first point we can put on the graph is the y-intercept. We put 0 in for x and then 7 for y. That's 1 point. And then we can put in, let's say, 1 for x, so 1 times negative 3 is negative 3, plus 7 would be 4, so 1, 4 is a point. We can put 2 in for x, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6, plus 7 would be 1, so we have the point 2, 1. And we could keep going, but you can see those points are lining up on a straight line. So the graph and the equation in y equals mx plus b form makes us know that this is, in fact, a linear function. Let's look at a couple of other functions. Function b here, so we have y equals 9 times the quantity 1 plus 0.48 to the x power. So this doesn't look like it's in y equals mx plus b form, and in fact when we graph it, we get a graph that looks like this curve here. And it is not a linear function, and in fact this is an example of a function you'll learn more about later. It's an exponential function. Let's look at this one here. Y equals x squared minus 2x plus 10. So here we have another function that is not looking like it can be written in y equals mx plus b form no matter what we do to that equation. And when we graph it, it looks like this curve. That kind of a curve is called a parabola. And this kind of a function, which is nonlinear, is called a quadratic function. And then finally, let's look at one more function here. Y equals negative 2. Now this is a really interesting one because it doesn't even have an x term in it. Or does it? If you think about it, we could write this as in y equals mx plus b form as long as m equals 0. Because if m equals 0, then we have y equals 0x minus 2. Well, we wouldn't bother writing that 0x term then. We would just write y equals 2, which is what we originally started with. And if we graph this one, we can graph, let's say, 1.0 negative 2, which would be the y-intercept, and we could put in whatever number for x, let's say 7. And what's going to be 0 times 7 is 0, minus 2 is negative 2. So every point is going to have negative 2 as the y value, no matter what we put in for x, and it's going to be a horizontal line. And so when we have y equals some sort of number, it just means it's going to be a horizontal line with no x term in it other than 0x, but that still is a linear function. So here's some different examples. Remember, the key thing is understanding that if you can write it in y equals mx plus b form, and if the graph is a straight line, it's a linear function. Otherwise, it's nonlinear.